September the 12th, 1958. 11:47 p.m. inside the thick smoke-filled air of the Lenox Lounge. Big Sam's hand was shaking so hard you could hear the sweat hitting the floor. He gripped the cold steel of his .38 special, thinking about the $50,000 price tag the five families had put on Bumpy Johnson's head. Sam, the man who had been Bumpy's shadow for 5 years, had finally sold his soul. The plan was surgical. One shot to the back of the legend's head. Sam stepped into the dim light, aimed, and squeezed the trigger. Click. The room went deathly silent. Bumpy didn't flinch. He didn't run. He just turned around slowly, looked Sam dead in the eyes, and uttered 5 words that would change the history of Harlem forever. "I've been counting on you." Before we get into how Bumpy knew and the masterstroke he played next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps us keep these legends alive. Comment down below and let me know where in the world you're watching from. I want to see how far the Harlem legend travels. And if you know someone who loves true crime or street history, share this with them right now. To understand that night at the Lenox Lounge, you have to understand the man sitting at the table. In 1958, Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a kingpin. He was the shadow wall of Harlem. While the history books might paint him as a criminal, the streets knew him as the only thing standing between the community and the wolves of the 5 families. The Italian mob looked at Harlem and saw a gold mine of nickels and dimes from the numbers racket. But Bumpy looked at Harlem and saw home. He was a man who ruled through a complex currency of respect rather than raw fear. When a family was facing eviction, Bumpy was the one who quietly slipped the rent money under the door. When the law overstepped, Bumpy was the one whose phone calls made the pressure disappear. He was a strategist who understood that power isn't just about who you can kill, but who you can protect. The 5 families had tried everything to muscle him out: bribery, bullets, and backroom deals. But Bumpy remained the immovable object. He was Harlem's Grandmaster, always seeing the board 3 moves ahead of everyone else. By late 1958, the frustration within the Italian underworld had reached a boiling point. In a dimly lit back room, the titans of the New York Mafia, Frank Costello and Carlo Gambino, sat shrouded in cigar smoke, discussing the Bumpy Johnson problem with cold, calculating precision. They had tried every traditional tool in their arsenal. They'd sent high-level enforcers who returned in ambulances, tried bribing politicians who were already loyal to Harlem's king, and attempted negotiations that Bumpy simply swatted away. Costello, his voice a gravelly whisper, finally voiced the truth they were all dreading. Bumpy wasn't just a man. He was a fortress. Force had failed because Bumpy controlled the very ground they walked on. "This man is untouchable," Costello admitted, the glow of his cigar illuminating a face etched with irritation. But Gambino, the master of the long game, leaned forward with a predator's grin. He knew that even the strongest fortress has a cellar door. They didn't need a bigger army. They needed a single crack in the foundation. The decision was made to stop hunting the king and start scouting his court. They would find the one person Bumpy trusted with his life and turn that trust into a tomb. Tony the Collector was a specialist in human frailty. He didn't care about muscle or firepower. He looked for the invisible strings that move a man's soul. When he began digging into Samuel Big Sam Foster, he didn't find greed or a hunger for power. Instead, he found the rhythmic, labored wheezing of a young girl's breath. Sam's youngest daughter, Kesha, was fading in the grip of tuberculosis, and the cost of keeping her alive was a mountain of debt that loyalty couldn't climb. Bumpy had helped, handing over $2,000 without a second thought. But in the sterile, expensive world of 1950s medicine, it was a drop in a vast ocean. Tony realized that for Sam, every day was a countdown against a hospital ledger. The bodyguard was drowning in $50,000 of medical bills. watching his child wither away in a charity ward. Tony knew that a man who would take a bullet for his boss might feel differently when the person taking the hit was his own daughter. He had found the crack in the armor. It wasn't about betraying Bumpy. It was about buying Kesha the right to breathe. On August 20th, 1958, exactly 3 weeks before the night at the Lenox Lounge, the trap was finally set. Big Sam was leaving his apartment on 132nd Street when a black Cadillac, polished to a predatory sheen, pulled slowly to the curb. The window rolled down to reveal Tony the collector, smiling with the false warmth of an insurance salesman. Sam's hand instinctively reached for the .45 at his waistband, but Tony didn't flinch. He just gestured to the empty leather seat, offering 5 minutes of conversation that would change everything. Inside the car, the air was thick with the scent of expensive tobacco and impending doom. Tony didn't waste time with pleasantries. He opened a briefcase, revealing neat, banded stacks of $100 bills. $50,000. It was more than just paper. It was a ticket out of the charity ward for his daughter, Kesha. Tony's voice was cold and flat as he laid out the ultimatum. Take the money, pull the trigger on Bumpy, and vanish to a new life in Miami. Or refuse, and watch his daughter die slowly in a hospital bed. Sam stared at the money, the weight of the choice crushing the air from his lungs. When he stepped out of the car, the briefcase stayed with him. The Italian mob made a fatal mistake. They believed that power only wore silk suits and carried heavy steel. They never looked at the people who cleaned their floors, parked their cars, or shined their shoes. But Bumpy Johnson knew that in Harlem, the invisible people were the true eyes and ears of the street. Jerome, a quiet parking attendant who had worked the 132nd Street block for years, saw the black Cadillac pull up. He didn't recognize the driver, but he recognized the aura of the East Side mob. He watched Big Sam, a man he respected, climb into that back seat and emerge minutes later with a heavy briefcase and a ghost white face. Jerome didn't go to the police, and he didn't tell his friends. Instead, he made a single phone call. Within 2 hours, he was standing in Bumpy's office above Small's Paradise, sliding a slip of paper with a license plate number across the desk. Bumpy looked at the plate, then at Jerome, and handed him $500 for a truth the 5 families thought they had bought with $50,000. The network had spoken. The king now knew his brother was a stranger. Bumpy Johnson didn't become the king of Harlem by reacting. He became king by outthinking his enemies before they even knew they were in a game. After learning of the betrayal, he could have ordered a hit on Big Sam. But Bumpy wanted to deliver a message that would resonate from the streets of Harlem to the boardrooms of the 5 families. He paid a visit to Victor, a master gunsmith in Brooklyn, who had been modifying steel for Bumpy for 15 years. The request was unorthodox. He didn't want a weapon that killed. He wanted a dummy gun, a .38 special that looked, felt, and weighed exactly like Sam's service weapon, but was mechanically designed to do only one thing: click. The swap required the precision of a diamond heist. On September 8th, Bumpy sent Sam on a grueling 3-hour decoy errand to the Bronx to pick up a non-existent envelope. While Sam was fighting traffic, Bumpy and his most trusted associate, Illinois Gordon, slipped into Sam's apartment. They found the real pistol in its usual shoebox under the bed and replaced it with Victor's harmless masterpiece. Sam returned, checked his holster, and felt the familiar weight, never realizing that his life insurance had just been cancelled. The air of Harlem felt heavy that Friday night, as if the very streets knew what was coming. Every step Big Sam took toward the Lenox Lounge felt like a mile through deep mud. In his jacket pocket, the .38 felt like a block of lead, its weight a constant reminder of the choice he had made. For 5 years he had been Bumpy's shadow, the shield that caught the bullets and the brother who shared the cognac. He looked at the faces of the people on 125th Street, people Bumpy protected, and felt like a ghost among the living. But then the image of his daughter, Kesha, would flash in his mind, her chest heaving for air in that cold hospital ward, and his heart would harden again. It was a simple, brutal equation. Bumpy's life for Kesha's breath. By the time he reached the neon glow of the lounge, the man who walked through those doors wasn't the loyal protector anymore. He was a desperate father who had traded his honor for a briefcase of blood money. He pushed inside, the jazz music hitting him like a physical blow, and spotted Bumpy at his usual table, his back turned to the world. The metallic click of the useless firing pin was the loudest sound Sam had ever heard. As Bumpy turned his chair with a slow, agonizing composure, the bodyguard's world collapsed. He expected a bullet. Instead, he received a mirror. Bumpy looked at him not with rage, but with a profound, weary disappointment that cut deeper than any blade. "I've been counting on you, Sam," he said, his voice a low vibration in the absolute silence of the lounge. Bumpy reached into his breast pocket, but he didn't pull a weapon. He slid a thick, white envelope across the table. Inside weren't threats but receipts. Official hospital documents, stamped, paid in full. Every cent of Kesha's $50,000 debt had been settled that morning by Bumpy's own hand. The realization hit Sam like a physical blow to the chest. The brotherhood he had just tried to assassinate had already saved the very person he was killing for. Bumpy had been taking care of his people while Sam was counting the mob's silver. The money in the briefcase was now worthless, outmatched by a king's silent mercy that made the betrayal feel like a stain that could never be washed away. Sam walked out of the Lenox lounge on shaking legs, a broken man who had entered as a protector and left as a ghost. He would take his family and disappear into the gray industrial landscape of Detroit, carrying the crushing weight of Bumpy's mercy for the rest of his life. But the true earthquake was felt in the high-rent districts of the 5 families. When word reached the Italian bosses that Bumpy hadn't just survived, but had outplayed them using their own hitman as a pawn, the game changed forever. Carlo Gambino called an emergency summit the following afternoon, his voice unusually quiet. "We leave Harlem alone," he declared to the room of stunned capos. "You don't play chess with a man who knows your move 3 weeks before you make it." It was the first time the Mafia had ever retreated without a war, acknowledging that Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a boss, he was the neighborhood itself. Back at his corner table, Bumpy watched the jazz band resume their rhythm. He picked up his glass of cognac, the amber liquid catching the light, and took a slow, final sip. Harlem was silent, Harlem was safe, and Harlem was finally his.